sound of a rapid, alien heartbeat followed by a sharp, metallic clang. Visual, a close-up on a bloodied hand, human, clenching an alien weapon. A whispered, strained voice, they thought we were weak, they were wrong. Ever wondered what happens when humanity, against all odds, faces the oldest and most powerful forces in the galaxy? Why do some alien empires believe Earth deserves nothing but annihilation, yet we still stand defiant? How does a single human become the nightmare that even the cosmos' deadliest assassins fear? Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story. If you're ready to dive deep into thrilling tales of alien encounters, high-stakes galactic politics, and humanity's unexpected victories, then smash that like button, drop a comment below with the code word DEFIANCE, and subscribe to the channel. Let's unravel this incredible story together. The transport kissed the docking bay floor of Century Prime Station with barely a whisper, a stark contrast to the cacophony that awaited Michael Vasto beyond its shimmering doors. Stepping onto the polished plasteel, his simple black suit felt like a deliberate act of defiance against the flamboyant alien tapestry that swirled around him. They were a grotesque ballet of evolution, towering KRYLL with skin like stained glass, the multi-eyed, chittering Grogner whose fur seemed to absorb all light, and the ethereal Lumina, beings of pure, shifting energy that hummed with an inner light. This station, a monument to galactic unity or perhaps just a testament to the universe's capacity for the bizarre, was supposedly the nexus of all things. Yet, Michael felt like a misplaced decimal point in an infinite equation. The air itself was a sensory assault, a bizarre cocktail of fermented swamp gas from the Boblodites, the sharp, metallic tang of the Zarathian oil slick secretions, and the cloying sweetness of the Anarian pheromones. Holographic advertisements flickered with impossible deals on nebula real estate and sentient algae snacks. Beings brushed past him, their alien indifference a palpable force. Some, the elder races with their millennia of perceived superiority etched onto their condescending faces, offered fleeting glances of what could only be described as biological distaste. Others, the newer arrivals still wide-eyed at the galactic circus, stared with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity, as if he were a particularly underwhelming exhibit in a planetary zoo. His human skin, so smooth and unadorned compared to the chitinous plates and shimmering scales around him, prickled under their scrutiny. The whispers, carried on the drafts of alien exhalations, were like tiny, venomous darts. The human, a KRYLL with razor-sharp facial angles, hissed to its companion, its translucent fingers curling in a gesture that clearly implied a short and insignificant lifespan. Michael's lips twitched, a micro-expression that betrayed nothing of the simmering resentment he'd learned to master. 15 years. 15 Earth years was all it had taken for humanity to claw its way past the lightspeed barrier, a feat that had taken these ancient civilizations eons of tedious, incremental progress. They saw humans as cosmic toddlers, banging on the doors of a club they hadn't earned the right to enter. Wildcards. That's what they called them. Unpredictable, fast learning, and possessing a terrifying knack for adapting and weaponizing everything they touched. Michael moved with a practiced, almost languid grace, a counterpoint to the nervous energy that vibrated around him. He passed a delegation of Talon, their crystalline skin refracting the station's light in 1,000 dazzling shards, their melodic language sounding like wind chimes in a hurricane. They pointedly ignored him. A squat, granite-skinned Borak exchanged guttural clicks with a Zithian delegate, their multiple eyes fixated on some unseen point of galactic intrigue, deliberately excluding the Terran interloper. The air thickened with a silent, collective judgment. Then, a figure detached itself from the swirling chaos and materialized at his side with an almost unsettling fluidity. Green-skinned, with large, obsidian eyes that seemed to absorb all light, Cherclix exuded an air of calm authority that barely concealed a palpable hostility. Its slender, multi-jointed hand extended in a gesture that was both introduction and a subtle claim of dominance. Human Vasto, its voice was a smooth, synthesized tone, devoid of warmth. Follow me to your designated containment unit. The Galactic Council will grace you with their presence in 3 of your Earth hours. Michael offered a curt nod, conserving his breath and his patience. Pleasantries were a human weakness these beings would exploit. Silence, he had learned, was a far more potent weapon in the face of alien condescension. He had anticipated the cold reception, the barely veiled contempt. It still grated, a constant reminder of Earth's precarious position in this cosmic hierarchy. The diplomatic mission was already a tightrope walk over a chasm of galactic egos. These so-called powers would never accept humanity's rapid ascent without a fight, a challenge, a desperate attempt to prune this upstart species before it could truly bloom. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Michael felt the invisible weight of their gazes boring into his back. Too fragile. Too young. How long before they contaminate everything? The whispers slithered through the air, their prejudice laid bare like a festering wound. But Michael remained outwardly impassive, his stride even, his hand still. He had endured far worse than alien sneers. He carried the ghosts of battles fought in shadows humanity didn't even know existed. This was merely a different kind of battlefield. Finally, they arrived at a room that reeked of deliberate insignificance. Sparse. Utilitarian. A blatant display of the Council's low expectations. A bed, a desk, a storage unit that looked suspiciously like a repurposed waste disposal. They expected him to be a footnote, a temporary inconvenience in their grand cosmic narrative. Chair Clicks offered a shallow bow, its emotionless eyes never leaving Michael's. Rest. Prepare to be judged. As the green alien receded, Michael didn't immediately succumb to the urge to sanitize every surface. He began to examine his prison cell. He understood the game. He wasn't just a diplomat, he was the embodiment of a species that had dared to reach for the stars too quickly. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on him, a familiar burden. He reached into his worn leather satchel and retrieved 3 unassuming objects, a battered poetry book, a well-worn wooden pencil, and a simple, tarnished medallion. For all their mundanity, they held the weight of history, of loss, of a past the galaxy knew nothing about. He placed them on the sterile metal desk, the book's edges softened by countless readings, the medallion catching the faint, cold light. This wasn't diplomacy. This was the prelude to something far more dangerous. And Michael Vasto was no stranger to danger. The silence in the room was a suffocating blanket, broken only by the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the station's life support, a constant, low thrum that felt less like comfort and more like the breathing of a predator just out of sight. Michael didn't immediately succumb to the weary slump his body craved. Instead, his sharp gray eyes, honed by years spent in the unforgiving theater of human conflict, began a meticulous sweep of the space. This wasn't just a room, it was a statement. A deliberate stripping away of any semblance of diplomatic courtesy, a clear message that Earth and its representative were considered, at best, a nuisance. The bare metal walls seemed to press in on him, their cold, unyielding surfaces reflecting the pale, artificial light in a way that amplified the room's emptiness. It was designed to belittle, to isolate. A cage disguised as accommodation. He moved with the fluid economy of motion of someone intimately acquainted with danger. His fingers, calloused and bearing the faint scars of battles long past, brushed lightly against the walls, seeking the almost imperceptible seams that might betray a hidden panel, a concealed lens. Trusting his instincts was a reflex, ingrained from a time when a missed detail meant the difference between survival and becoming another ghost in the machine of war. He knew the insidious nature of these galactic power structures. Surveillance wasn't a possibility, it was a guarantee. Every newcomer, every potential disruptor to their carefully maintained order would be subjected to layers of scrutiny. Humanoid security, their faces impassive and alien, or the unseen eyes of the Council's intelligence networks were undoubtedly cataloging his every twitch, every breath. It took mere moments for him to locate the first intrusion. A tiny sensor, disguised with a pathetic lack of imagination as a decorative light fixture in the corner, its lens barely larger than the head of a pin. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. With a swift, practiced motion, he pried it loose, his fingers working with a precision that spoke of countless disarms in far more hostile environments. The next was more cunning, a micro-camera embedded within a ventilation grate, its aperture cleverly masked by the intricate latticework. A ghost of a sardonic smile touched Michael's lips as he disabled it, the tiny device feeling like a fragile insect crushed between his fingers. By the time his silent audit was complete, he had unearthed 6 such devices, each a silent observer feeding information into an unseen network. His hand hovered over the last one, a thin wire leading to what felt like a recessed monitor within the wall itself, its presence almost undetectable to an untrained eye. With a subtle twist of his wrist, he severed the connection, silencing its unseen gaze. He stepped back, a grim satisfaction settling within him. At least within these four sterile walls, he had reclaimed a sliver of privacy. The message was clear: underestimate him at your peril. The galaxy might see a naive newcomer, but Michael Vasto was a veteran of a far more brutal arena. He knew how to play the game of shadows. With a deliberate breath, he unzipped his worn satchel. The contents were deliberately mundane, a carefully curated selection of items designed to ground him in the alien chaos. A collection of Terran poetry, its pages softened and creased from countless readings, each verse a whisper of a world he might never fully return to. A simple wooden pencil, its surface bearing the nicks and scratches of countless thoughts and plans sketched in the dead of night. And the medallion, a gift from his mentor, a gruff old soldier who had taught him the brutal calculus of survival, a constant weight against his chest, a tangible link to a past both cherished and haunted. These weren't just objects, they were anchors, talismans in a universe that felt determined to strip away his humanity. The medallion, cool against his palm, held a weight that belied its simple form, a silent testament to sacrifices made and lines crossed. He placed them on the cold metal desk with a precise ritualism, each item in its designated place, a small act of defiance against the alien sterility. As his fingers traced the worn edges of the poetry book, his mind flickered back to Earth, to a life lived in the stark realities of conflict, a life where diplomacy was a bullet and negotiation was the sound of a charging rifle. The Galactic Council, with their elaborate protocols and veiled threats, couldn't even begin to fathom the landscapes of human war, the depths of human resilience, or the darkness that some humans carried within them. He activated his secure tablet, a sliver of home amidst the alien technology, its encryption protocols a fragile shield against unknown prying eyes. A message blinked onto the screen, the stark text a cold reminder of the stakes. Earth Command, arrival safe. Reception, predictable. Preparing for initial contact. Exercise extreme caution. Intel suggests heightened hostility from Dravari delegation. The Dravari. Red-scaled, with eyes like molten gold and a reputation forged in the fires of 1,000 conquests. Their disdain for humanity was an open wound in the fragile fabric of galactic peace. They saw Earth's rapid expansion as an affront, a challenge to their self-proclaimed dominance. But fear was a luxury Michael couldn't afford. He had stared into the abyss of human cruelty and emerged, scarred but unbroken. Political posturing was a child's game compared to the wars he had witnessed, the enemies he had faced, mercenaries whose loyalty was measured in blood, assassins who moved like whispers in the dark, warriors who had learned the fatal cost of underestimating a seemingly fragile human. His thumb moved across the tablet screen, his response concise and unwavering. Vasto, understood. Dravari hostility noted. Will not dictate terms. Engaging is required. The words were a quiet declaration of intent. His face remained a mask of stoicism, but beneath the surface, the gears of his mind were already turning, calculating angles, assessing threats. The stakes were astronomical, far beyond any terrestrial negotiation. The galaxy's elite were watching, their alien eyes dissecting his every move. But Michael Vasto had never backed down from a fight, no matter the odds. As he set the tablet down, a familiar prickling sensation crawled across his skin, the ghost of a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. The sense of being watched, not just by the Dravari or the Council's unseen eyes, but by something else, something ancient and unknowable lurking in the periphery. It was a feeling that echoed the long nights spent in hostile territory, every shadow a potential enemy. He was on the precipice again, standing at the edge of a conflict far larger than himself. The Dravari, in their arrogance, had underestimated him. They would soon learn that humans, especially this particular human, were not to be trifled with. Michael's gaze swept across the sterile room one last time, his mind already shifting to the next phase of the mission. The Council awaited. And he would be ready. The Grand Hall was a sensory supernova, a dizzying vortex of alien life. Conversations buzzed like swarms of metallic insects, the air thick with exotic perfumes that ranged from the sweet, cloying scent of the anar to the sharp, almost predatory musk of the Dravari, a perpetual olfactory warning sign. Orbs of light drifted through the air like captured fireflies, casting an ethereal glow on the meticulously arranged refreshment tables groaning under the weight of foodstuffs that defied earthly description. Hollow screens shimmered with images of distant, alien landscapes and holographic dancers, their forms fluid and impossible, wove through the throng, their movements a mesmerizing defiance of physics. At first glance, Michael was a shadow in this vibrant chaos, a monochrome figure amidst a kaleidoscope of alien hues. The assembled delegates, representatives of civilizations that had witnessed the rise and fall of stars, mingled with an air of detached superiority, seemingly oblivious to the lone human in their midst. Some flickered a glance in his direction, their multifaceted eyes conveying a mixture of clinical curiosity and profound distaste. Others offered longer, more deliberate stares, their expressions radiating an ancient prejudice, a deep-seated resentment for this upstart species that had dared to breach the cosmic club without the requisite millennia of polite stagnation. He was an anomaly, a glitch in their carefully ordered universe. Michael moved through the throng with a deceptive calm, his posture erect, his hands held loosely at his sides. His steps were silent on the polished floor, each movement measured, deliberate. The low hum of the hall's energy conduits was the only sound that truly registered, a subtle vibration against the sudden, sharp intakes of breath he occasionally felt directed his way. Some alien physiologies registered humans as unsettling. Others, apparently, found them aesthetically offensive. He harbored no illusions about humanity standing amongst these elder races. They saw Earth as a newborn pup yipping at the heels of ancient, battle-scarred wolves. He passed a cluster of KRYLL, their crystalline skin catching the light in a dazzling display, their high-pitched, melodic language a stark contrast to the guttural clicks of a nearby Borak delegation, whose stony visages remained fixed on the Zerpan envoy, their multiple eyes conveying a silent, complex negotiation. Michael could feel the subtle shift in the atmosphere as he moved, the almost imperceptible tightening of alien muscles, the fleeting narrowing of multifaceted eyes. Hostility, though carefully veiled beneath layers of galactic etiquette, was a palpable presence. Then, a voice cut through the alien symphony, sharp and cold, like the snap of brittle ice. "So, this is Earth's best." The condescension dripped from the words, a viscous, alien venom. Michael's internal alarm bells, finely tuned by years of navigating human treachery, went off instantly. Ambassador Krall, the Dravari representative, stood before him, a towering figure whose crimson scales gleamed under the artificial light. His features were sharp, predatory, his yellow eyes locking onto Michael with undisguised scorn. The Dravari, a warrior race whose reputation for brutal efficiency preceded them across galaxies. Krall, however, seemed to have made it his personal crusade to belittle humanity's presence. He leaned in, the air around him thick with a musky, aggressive scent, his voice a low growl meant for Michael's ears alone. "You don't belong here, human. You are new. Unrefined. Why don't you crawl back to your mudball planet before you embarrass yourselves further?" Michael remained still, his face a carefully constructed mask of neutrality, his gray eyes, however, held a glacial chill. He had anticipated this. The insults, the mockery, they were all part of the game. He didn't react immediately, knowing that any flicker of emotion would be interpreted as weakness, a confirmation of their prejudiced assumptions. He let Krall's words hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. Then, in a swift, deliberate motion that spoke volumes about his contempt, Krall's scaled hand shot out, knocking the drink Michael had been holding, a bland, suspiciously viscous alien concoction, from his grasp. The glass shattered on the polished floor, sending droplets of the alien fluid scattering like tiny, iridescent tears. A hush fell over the immediate vicinity, a sharp, collective intake of breath echoing through the hall. All eyes, multifaceted, compound, and singular, swiveled towards the scene. For a fleeting moment, the alien cacophony ceased. Krall sneered, his razor-sharp teeth flashing in a predatory grin. "How fitting! The human diplomat is as clumsy as his species is insignificant. Weak. Fragile." His voice dripped with venom, each word a deliberate barb. You can't even hold a simple beverage, let alone hold your own in the Galactic Council. Leave now, little earthworm, and perhaps we will forget we ever saw you." The air crackled with unspoken tension. The assembled aliens watched with a morbid fascination, unsure whether this was a diplomatic faux pas or the prelude to something far more visceral. Michael's gaze never wavered. Calm. Unflinching. Then, a slow, almost imperceptible curve touched his lips, not a smile of apology, but a subtle, dangerous challenge. "Perhaps," Michael replied, his voice quiet yet carrying a weight that sliced through the sudden silence like a honed blade. "But here we are." The words hung in the air, a simple statement of fact that somehow managed to deflate Krall's theatrical display. He didn't raise his voice, didn't betray a hint of anger. He simply acknowledged the Dravari's hostility without flinching. His composure, the very act of remaining unperturbed, seemed to ignite a fresh wave of fury in Krall's reptilian eyes. The hall remained still, but the silence now buzzed with unspoken judgments, with the subtle calculations of alien minds assessing the dynamic shift. Krall's face contorted in a silent rage, his yellow eyes narrowing into slits. He took a menacing step forward, the air around him growing thick with the metallic tang of his rising aggression. "You have just signed your death warrant, human. Leave now, or there will be an accident. One that even your primitive species will understand." The weight of his threat was palpable, a suffocating pressure in the suddenly still air. His voice, though low, resonated through the hall, causing some of the more sensitive alien species to twitch nervously. The challenge was laid bare. Michael was. "All right, let's delve deeper into the tense atmosphere of the Grand Hall, focusing on the escalating conflict with Ambassador Krall and Michael's internal state, all while maintaining that third-person, action-driven narrative laced with dark wit." The air in the Grand Hall, once buzzing with the superficial pleasantries of intergalactic diplomacy, now crackled with a palpable tension, thick and suffocating like the pre-storm stillness before a planetary tempest. All eyes, a bizarre assortment of multifaceted, compound, and singular orbs, remained fixed on the tableau of simmering hostility between the towering, crimson-scaled Dravari ambassador and the seemingly unimposing human diplomat. Ambassador Krall's face, a rigid mask of reptilian fury, twitched with barely suppressed rage. His yellow eyes, like molten gold, remained locked on Michael's retreating form, a silent promise of retribution hanging heavy in the air. The casual dismissal, the blatant disrespect, it was a calculated act, a public declaration of war against the fledgling presence of humanity in the galactic arena. Michael moved through the suddenly hushed crowd, the silence amplifying the soft swish of his simple black suit against the ornate fabrics of the alien delegates. Outwardly, he projected an air of serene indifference, his face a carefully constructed blank canvas. But beneath the calm facade, his mind was a whirlwind of tactical calculations. He had anticipated resistance, prejudice even, but Krall's open aggression was a significant escalation. It wasn't just about bruised egos, it was about power, about the established order feeling threatened by an unknown quantity. Humanity, in its rapid ascent, had disrupted the delicate balance of galactic politics, and the old guard was clearly not amused. He could feel the weight of their collective judgment, the unspoken consensus that Earth was an unwelcome intrusion. It echoed the countless times in human history when new powers had risen, challenging the old, the inevitable clash of dominance and survival. War, he knew intimately, was often born not of malice, but of fear, the fear of being eclipsed, of losing control. These ancient races, with their millennia of perceived superiority, were terrified of humanity's raw potential, its unpredictable adaptability, its relentless drive. As he navigated the sea of alien faces, fragments of past conflicts flickered through Michael's mind, the bitter taste of loss, the hollow ache of grief for comrades fallen in battles fought on forgotten corners of Earth. He remembered the faces of his mentors, their grim warnings about the true cost of conflict, the scars it left not just on the body, but on the soul. He carried those scars, invisible to the alien eyes that scrutinized him, but a constant reminder of the stakes involved in any confrontation. This wasn't just about Earth's political standing, it was about the survival of his species, the legacy he would leave behind. He paused briefly near a delegation of elegant, insectoid beings, their delicate antennae twitching as they observed the unfolding drama with detached curiosity. They saw it as a spectacle, a minor squabble in the grand theater of galactic affairs. They couldn't comprehend the underlying currents of fear and resentment that threatened to erupt into open conflict. He reached a less crowded alcove, his back to the wall, his senses on high alert. He needed to assess the situation, to anticipate Krall's next move. The Dravari were not known for their subtlety. Their aggression was direct, brutal. The public display in the Grand Hall was likely just the opening salvo. He could almost feel the invisible threads of conspiracy tightening around him. Who else among the council shared Krall's animosity? Who would be willing to align themselves with such blatant hostility? The faces of the other delegates flashed through his mind, the inscrutable gaze of the Zarathian representative, the veiled amusement in the eyes of the Anarian envoy, the stony indifference of the Borak. Alliances were fluid in this galactic arena, shifting with perceived advantage and the ever-present threat of force. A small, almost imperceptible movement caught his eye, a fleeting flicker of light reflecting off a polished surface across the hall. Too deliberate to be accidental. Surveillance. He was being watched, his every reaction scrutinized. It was a familiar sensation, a constant companion from his days operating in the shadows of human conflict. He allowed a flicker of annoyance to cross his face, a carefully calibrated display of human frustration. Let them watch. Let them underestimate his awareness. He knew they would interpret his reaction as weakness, further confirmation of their prejudiced assumptions. They wouldn't see the cold, calculating gears turning beneath the surface. He was a predator in their gilded cage, and they had just made the fatal mistake of showing their teeth. The game, as far as Michael Vasto was concerned, had just gotten interesting. The holographic projections of distant nebulae and swirling galaxies cast an eerie, silent light across Michael's Spartan quarters, their beauty a stark contrast to the gnawing unease that had settled in the pit of his stomach. Despite the apparent tranquility of the late hour, a primal instinct, honed by years spent in the shadows of human conflict, screamed of imminent danger. He stared at the shifting celestial patterns, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities, each more lethal than the last. The memory of the blue-skinned alien, its desperate whisper cut short by a silent, invisible dart, replayed in his mind like a broken recording. Trust, he knew, was a luxury he couldn't afford in this viper's nest of galactic politics. Then, a flicker of movement in the periphery of his vision shattered the deceptive calm. A small, blue-skinned figure, its angular features sharp and insect-like, slipped into the room with a practiced stealth that spoke of a life lived in the shadows. Its large, black eyes, wide with a desperate urgency, darted around the room before locking onto Michael. Human Vasto. It hissed, its voice a trembling whisper. Michael's senses went on high alert. He was accustomed to being watched, to the feeling of unseen eyes tracking his every move, but this was different. This alien's presence radiated a raw fear, a desperate need to convey something vital. I have information. The Dravari, they are planning something. Something deadly. Before the alien could elaborate, a barely perceptible thwip sliced through the silence. A minuscule dart, its trajectory almost invisible in the dim light, sprouted from the alien's neck. A choked gasp escaped its lips, its wide eyes registering shock and betrayal in the split second before its slender body crumpled to the floor with a sickening thud. Michael was on his feet in an instant, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knelt beside the fallen alien, his fingers surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline surging through his veins, searching for a pulse. Nothing. The dart had been swift, efficient, a silent messenger of death. Poison, or something far more exotic and lethal than anything he had encountered in human warfare. His breath hitched, a fleeting wave of anger and frustration washing over him. Another pawn sacrificed in this galactic game. He forced his emotions down, his mind already racing, scanning the shadows for any sign of the unseen assailant. Before he could formulate a plan, the door to his quarters hissed open, and two security officers, their uniforms stark and imposing in the dim light, strode in. Their alien faces were impassive, their eyes taking in the scene with a chilling lack of surprise. The dead alien on the floor, Michael kneeling beside it, his expression grim. Their reaction was immediate, their movements practiced. Tragic accident, one of them muttered, his tone dismissive as he knelt to examine the body. Looks like a bad reaction to some local flora. No signs of unpleasantness. The casual dismissal sent a cold fury coursing through Michael. The cover-up had already begun. Sweep it under the rug. A simple, unfortunate incident. The Dravari's machinations would continue unimpeded, and this dead alien would become another forgotten statistic in the cold calculus of galactic power. But Michael wasn't buying it. Not for a single, damn second. The Dravari's hostility in the Grand Hall, the swift, silent assassination, the pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. They weren't just threatening him, they were eliminating anyone who might become an obstacle to their plans. His fingers moved with practiced speed to the secure tablet at his side, his mind already shifting into a tactical mode honed by years of covert operations. Protocol dictated certain actions, but instinct screamed for something more. He typed rapidly, the screen illuminating with a coded message destined only for Earth Command. Situation critical. Dravari escalating to direct action. Witness eliminated. Request immediate extraction. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his finger hovering over the send icon. The weight of his next words felt immense, a point of no return. He pressed send. Then, as the oblivious security officers continued their charade, Michael reached down to his satchel. His fingers brushed against the familiar texture of the false bottom he had meticulously installed, a habit born from a life where trust was a dangerous commodity. With a silent slide, the hidden compartment revealed itself. Inside, nestled against the worn fabric, lay the poetry book, the pencil, and the medallion, the seemingly innocuous objects he had placed on the desk earlier, a naive attempt to hold onto a semblance of his past in this alien landscape. He took a long, steadying breath, the air in the room suddenly feeling thick and heavy. This was no longer a diplomatic dance, it was a hunt. He had known the risks of stepping into the galactic arena, but the shadows were closing in faster than he had anticipated. His past, the skills he had tried to bury beneath layers of diplomacy, were being dragged back into the light. There was no turning back now. As he sealed the hidden compartment, a grim smile touched the corners of his lips. Thought I was out, he whispered to the silent room, but looks like I'm back in the game. The reply from Earth Command was swift and brutal, a string of encrypted characters that translated into a stark, unforgiving reality. Extraction negated. Survive by any means necessary. A cold knot tightened in Michael's stomach. There would be no cavalry riding to his rescue. He was alone, a single human pawn in a game played by ancient, ruthless powers. The Council, the Dravari, they were all hunting him now. He straightened, his expression hardening into a mask of grim determination. The night was young, and Michael Vasto had no intention of becoming prey. He heard the soft click of the door sliding open again. This time, it wasn't the uniformed security. The soft, almost silent padding of multiple feet sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the station's recycled air. The hunt had begun in earnest. And Michael was ready. The only sound in Michael's quarters was the almost imperceptible hum of the station's deep machinery, a rhythmic pulse that underscored the unnatural stillness of the room. Outside, Century Prime Station throbbed with the ceaseless activity of 1,000 alien species, but within these four walls, a different kind of energy crackled, the silent, coiled tension of impending violence. Michael lay motionless on the narrow bed, his eyes closed, feigning a rest he hadn't known for years. Sleep was a vulnerability he could ill afford in this galactic hornet's nest. His body might have appeared relaxed, but every nerve ending was a live wire, his senses stretched taut, anticipating the inevitable intrusion. Darkness had settled over the room like a shroud, the faint glow of the emergency lights casting long, distorted shadows that danced with unseen threats. In the oppressive silence, one could almost taste the metallic tang of fear. Then, the soft hiss of the door sliding open was a gunshot in the stillness. A team of Dravari assassins, their movements fluid and eerily silent, materialized in the doorway. There were shadows given form, their sleek, red-scaled armor shimmering faintly in the dim light, their eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. Krall's directive had been unambiguous: eliminate the human diplomat. Permanently. Leave no trace. They moved with a synchronized precision honed by generations of warfare, each step deliberate, each breath controlled. Sonic blades, capable of slicing through almost any material with barely a whisper, were drawn and held ready. They fanned out across the small room, their multifaceted eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, trained to identify weakness, to exploit any vulnerability. They expected an easy kill, a fragile human caught unawares. They were profoundly mistaken. A sudden, almost imperceptible flicker of the overhead lights, a momentary disruption in the station's power grid, caused the assassins to freeze, their wary glances meeting in the brief illumination. The room seemed to shift in that fleeting instant between darkness and light, the very atmosphere thickening with an unseen presence. And then, it came, Michael's voice, calm, cold, and resonating from the shadows with an almost supernatural clarity. "You should have brought more men." The words were a blade of ice, slicing through the tense silence. The assassins recoiled, their eyes snapping towards the bed where Michael had been lying. The figure there remained still, unmoving. But Michael was gone. The bed was empty. A primal shiver traced the spine of the lead assassin. They knew, with a sickening certainty, that they had walked into a trap. This human was not the soft target they had anticipated. Their grip tightened on their silent weapons as they spread out further, their movements becoming more frantic as they searched for the source of the disembodied voice. The room was silent again, a heavy, suffocating stillness that felt like the prelude to a storm. Then, the darkness erupted. A blur of motion, faster than their enhanced reflexes could fully register. One of the assassins swung his sonic blade, aiming for a shadow that flickered in the corner, but met only empty air. He swung again, blindly, hissing in frustration, but found nothing but the cool metal of the wall. Then, Michael was upon them, a whirlwind of controlled violence. His hand shot out, the cord of his seemingly innocuous medallion wrapping around the first assassin's throat with the speed and efficiency of a constrictor snake. A swift, brutal tug, and the assassin collapsed, his sonic blade clattering uselessly to the floor as he choked for air. Before the others could react, Michael was a phantom, moving with an eerie, almost unnatural speed. He disarmed the second assassin with a brutal efficiency, his movements a blur of hands and feet. The seemingly insignificant wooden pencil, clutched in his hand, its tip now gleaming with a deadly purpose, became a lethal weapon, driven into the assassin's throat with a quick, precise thrust, the sickening crack of bone echoing in the confined space. The third assassin lunged, his sonic blade whistling through the air, but Michael had already anticipated the attack. His hand shot out, an iron grip clamping down on the assassin's wrist, twisting it with brutal force until the bones audibly snapped. As the assassin crumpled to the floor, Michael showed no hesitation, delivering a swift, final strike to the neck. The lead assassin stood frozen, his blade raised, his multifaceted eyes wide with disbelief, his reptilian jaw slack with shock as he stared at Michael, now standing amidst the silent, twitching bodies of his comrades. What are you?" the assassin choked out, his voice trembling with a dawning horror. Michael didn't flinch. His voice, when it came, was calm, almost detached, as if reciting a mundane task. "Just a diplomat." Before the assassin could process the chillingly understated reply, Michael's hand shot out, snatching the sonic blade from his paralyzed grip. In a fluid, almost elegant motion, he reversed the blade and plunged it into the assassin's chest. Silence descended once more, heavy with the stench of alien blood. The bodies of the Dravari assassins lay sprawled across the floor, a gruesome testament to the lethal capabilities hidden beneath the veneer of a mild-mannered human diplomat. Michael stood for a moment, his breathing even, his mind already processing the next step. With a quiet exhale, he moved with the same deliberate grace back to his bed, his movements betraying none of the brutal efficiency he had just displayed. The carnage was already fading into the background of his awareness. It was done. Necessary. As he lay back down, the holographic clock above his bed ticked silently. The night was far from over. The holographic clock above Michael's bed pulsed with a soft, blue light, each passing second a silent testament to the escalating danger. Outside his quarters, the muffled sounds of Century Prime Station continued their relentless hum, a stark contrast to the absolute stillness within the room. The lingering scent of alien blood, a metallic and faintly acrid odor, hung heavy in the recycled air, a grim reminder of the brutal efficiency he had been forced to unleash. He lay on the bed, the synthetic fabric beneath him now subtly stained, his gaze fixed on the ceiling, his mind a whirlwind of calculations and grim reflections. Sleep was a distant memory, replaced by a hyper-awareness, a primal alertness that had saved his life countless times. The faces of the fallen Dravari assassins, their alien features contorted in final surprise, flickered behind his eyelids. He felt no remorse, only a cold, detached satisfaction. They had come to kill him, and he had simply ensured they wouldn't succeed. War, in all its myriad forms, had taught him the brutal calculus of survival: eliminate the threat before it eliminates you. It was a simple, savage equation, devoid of sentiment. Yet, beneath the hardened exterior, a flicker of something akin to weariness stirred within him. The constant violence, the endless cycle of threat and response, was a heavy burden, a shadow that clung to him no matter how far he traveled from the battlefields of his past. He remembered a young medic on Earth, her face pale with exhaustion, tending to the wounded amidst the chaos of a frontline triage. Her quiet dedication, her unwavering compassion in the face of unimaginable horror, had always struck him as a far more profound form of strength than any weapon. But in this cold, alien landscape, compassion was a vulnerability. Here, survival demanded a different kind of calculus. He ran a mental inventory of the immediate aftermath. The security officer's pathetic attempt at a cover-up, the swift, brutal efficiency of the assassination squad, Earth Command's terse, unforgiving message: survive by any means necessary. He was alone, adrift in a sea of alien intrigue and hostility, with a target painted squarely on his back. The medallion, still clutched tightly in his hand beneath the covers, felt like a tangible link to a life that now seemed impossibly distant. He remembered the old soldier who had given it to him, his voice gruff with a surprising undercurrent of affection: keep this close, kid. It'll remind you who you are, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. The world, or in this case, the galaxy, was certainly trying to tell him who he was, an insignificant upstart to be silenced. They were wrong. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, the subtle creak of the frame the only sound in the room. The night was indeed young, and the game had just begun. He needed to move, to disappear back into the labyrinthine corridors of Century Prime Station before the Council's cleanup crew arrived. He needed to find out what the Dravari were planning, who else was involved, and how to turn the tables on his would-be executioners. A plan, as always, began to form in the cold, calculating corners of his mind. It wouldn't be pretty. It wouldn't be diplomatic. But it would ensure his survival. He reached down and retrieved the discarded sonic blade from the floor, its alien design surprisingly comfortable in his grip. Humanity had a knack for understanding and adapting to alien technology, especially when that technology could be used to keep them alive. As he moved towards the door, a grim smile touched his lips. Diplomacy, it seemed, had taken a rather violent detour. And so, the night on Century Prime Station takes a dark and dangerous turn. What will Michael Vasto do next? Can one human truly stand against the might of the galaxy's established powers? To find out what happens in the next chapter of humanity's saga among the stars, make sure you hit the like button if you enjoyed this story, leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below, and subscribe to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story for more gripping tales from the universe. Your support fuels the next human victory.